This incredible grid of polyethylene tubes is going to revolutionize my garden planning, how I plant my garden plants, and more importantly, how I water my raised beds. Join me today as I show you how I set up my Garden in Minutes garden grid watering system. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I'm going to put this grid system into this brand new bed. But I'm not limited to putting it into my new beds. I can also use this system in my old beds. These grids are designed for 4-foot by 8-foot beds, and coincidentally, that's the size of the beds I have in my vegetable garden. All I have to do is just lay the grid onto the surface of the soil. The actual size is less than 4 feet by 8 feet, so there's enough room between the edges of this watering system and my bed, and even the support posts I have in the corners don't pose a problem with the fit. The garden grid watering system comes in segments. There are 2 ends that are already pre-assembled. One of the ends has a fitting. This is where the water is going to enter. And then there are pre-assembled sections for the middle. And it all depends on how big your setup is to determine just how many of these segments you're going to get. And then it's a simple matter of just connecting all these pieces. Now, you should do this in a nice, clean, level area, because you don't want to get any soil into any of these polyethylene tubes. And then it's a simple matter of just pushing in the fittings into the tubes. If you do this on a nice hot day, the tubes are going to be warmer and softer, and it's going to end up being much easier. Gently rotating the fitting side makes it much easier to push into the tubing. So basically just twisting my hands back and forth until the end of the tube is flush with the middle. In just a few minutes, the entire grid is assembled and it's ready to put into the garden bed. While this watering system can fit my other raised beds, I got it specifically to fit into this bed. This is a Garden in Minutes metal raised bed, and it measures a little bit less than 4 feet by 8 feet, ideal for this specific grid. In fact, it came as a bundle, the bed system and the watering system together. What makes this Garden in Minutes raised bed unique is that the corners are at a 90-degree angle, the same angle as all of the grid squares. That's different than just about all the other raised metal bed kits you're going to find. They all have rounded corners. The assembly goes surprisingly quickly. I suggest that you put all the pieces together and just finger tight. And when everything is in place and in the final location, then come back for the final tightening of all those nuts and bolts. What took the longest for me was actually removing the plastic film that protects each of these pieces in shipping. Be careful during that step, because as you pull off the plastic, the edges are sharp and it is possible that you might cut yourself. I filled this 17-inch high bed just like I do all of my other raised beds. I began with a layer of branches and wood chips, and then I added the soil. Now, most of this is a bulk soil that already has compost and topsoil mixed together, but I added some of my own compost. I also added some organic fertilizer. I don't normally add much fertilizer when I fill my beds in fall, but in spring, what time it is right now, I like to add fertilizer just to give the soil a boost and to help the plants out, because the soil life in this bed hasn't exploded yet. I need to give it time. I'll probably wait another few weeks before I put plants in the bed just to get that soil life started. But the fertilizer in the soil now will help benefit the plants before the soil life does it. With the garden grid watering system in place, now it's time to connect the water. The system comes with a riser tube to clear the top of the raised bed and a water inlet tube that connects to a manifold that you screw your hose onto. Now this manifold is designed that you can run another hose off of it to another bed that might also have the garden grid watering system. That means you can use this to set up an irrigation system for your entire garden. Laying these grids on your beds, connecting the manifolds, and with just a single irrigation source like your hose, you could string together all of your beds. Now each of the manifolds does have its own valve, so if you're setting up a system like this, you still have control over whether water goes to a bed or not. With the water turned on, let's send it to the grid now. And so with water flowing, it'll start coming out the tubes. We can direct these tubes to send water to each of the squares. The streams of water should form a grid themselves, so if it's shooting straight up in the air, we will just twist the tube to get the water to spray out horizontally. So we will adjust each of these squares to get the water to form the grid that we need. When it's adjusted correctly, the water sprays will themselves form little squares within the bigger grids. So my garden grid watering system is set up inside my Garden in Minutes raised bed, and I'm just going to let it run for a while. This soil is pretty dry, so I need it to moisten, to soak, to get this water as deep down as possible, to get that soil life growing. The water sprays look pretty consistent, pretty regular all the way around. I don't see any area that looks like it has stronger water pressure than another. In this raised bed, my soil level is below the top of the bed. That's why I use the riser. If the soil in your bed comes all the way to the top, or if you're not even using a raised bed, if you have a grid like this for an in-ground bed, you don't need the riser. You just have the water inlet hooked to your hose, and you can use as many of these grids as you want. And the 4-foot by 8-foot size of the bed and the grid is not a limiting factor. They've got grids in all different sizes, 2x2, 4x4, 1x5. You can find it at the Garden in Minutes website, and I'll put a link to that below. I'm really looking forward to using this system. I mentioned in the beginning how this is going to change the way I plan my garden beds. I like to use a modified square foot gardening system. In square foot gardening, each of these squares would be 12 inches. The grid system here has 10-inch squares, but I can still do the same basic planning. I can know exactly which seeds are going to go into which squares before I even bring them outside. I might be able to do 4 lettuces in this square, 5 beets in that square. For the bigger plants like the peppers and tomatoes, probably 1 per square. It makes for the planting very easy and the planting even easier because I just follow my plan and I know exactly where to put everything. As far as the watering, all of my other beds over there, I like to hand water, and I'll drag the hose everywhere to water my plants. With this system, I can set up the hose directly to my faucet. I could even put it on a timer if I wanted to, and then walk away. I'm not limited to hand watering. I think that's really going to give me more plants in a bed with actually less worry about the irrigation. You can expect that there will be many more videos to come as I show you just exactly how I plant in these beds and manage the irrigation system and, of course, reach the point of harvest. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.